Amelia was the quietest girl in her family. While her brothers ran through the fields laughing and shouting, she often sat by the window watching the hills in silence. She loved the sound of the wind, the soft rustle of trees, and the songs of birds that made her feel less alone. But her family never understood her quiet ways. They thought silence meant weakness. Her mother often sighed and said, "This girl is of no use. She doesn't talk, doesn't laugh, doesn't even know how to please people." Her father agreed, shaking his head as if she were a burden. They lived in a poor village near the edge of a mountain. The winters were harsh and the land gave little in return. When food was short, arguments were many. Amelia learned to stay out of sight during those moments. She cleaned, cooked, and helped in the fields, but no one seemed to notice. Her brothers mocked her, calling her slow. Sometimes when her mother was angry, she would say things that made Amelia's heart break. "You're just taking space. You'll never be good for anything." Amelia used to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe she truly was useless. She had never gone to school, never learned much beyond what the village women knew, washing, mending clothes, and tending to the chickens. But inside she had dreams she couldn't even put into words. She dreamed of peace, of being seen, of someone speaking kindly to her. Then one cold morning, everything changed. Her father came home with a man Amelia had never seen before, a trader from another town. He had a wagon filled with supplies and wore a thick fur coat. The two men spoke in low voices near the fire. Amelia could hear only bits and pieces. "She'll do for housework," the trader said. "I'll feed her and keep her alive." Her father nodded. "We need the grain," he said, avoiding Amelia's eyes. By evening it was decided. She was to go with the trader. Her mother didn't protest. Her brothers didn't even say goodbye. Amelia packed her few things, a shawl, a wooden comb, and a small ribbon she had kept from her childhood. When the trader's wagon rolled away, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. There was no one to stop her, no one to call her back. The journey was long and rough. The trader didn't speak much. He dropped her off at a mining town far up in the hills, where he ran a small lodging house for workers. "You'll clean, cook, and serve," he told her. "Do as you're told and you'll have food." Amelia nodded. She was used to following orders. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The work never ended. She woke before sunrise to fetch water from the well, sweep the floors, and wash clothes until her hands cracked in the cold. The men who stayed at the lodging house barely noticed her. To them, she was just the quiet girl who carried their meals. At night, she slept on a small bed near the kitchen. The air was cold and the roof leaked when it rained. Sometimes she dreamed of her old home, but then remembered how they had sold her, and her heart turned numb. She stopped hoping for anything better. She stopped dreaming. Then one evening, a storm came over the mountains. The sky turned gray and the wind screamed through the narrow streets. By night, the snow was falling so hard that the windows rattled. The trader and his helpers decided to leave for the lower town before the road was blocked. They didn't even tell Amelia. When she went to the kitchen, the house was empty. The fire had gone out. She tried to light another one, but the matches were wet. The cold crept through the walls, biting her skin. The roof started leaking and the icy wind blew through the cracks. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and tried to stay still. But soon her body started shaking uncontrollably. She realized she couldn't survive the night in that freezing house. Without thinking, she opened the door and stepped outside. The world was white and wild. Snowflakes stung her face and the wind howled like a living thing. She could barely see the road. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to find warmth. Her shoes filled with snow, her fingers turned stiff, and her breath came out in short gasps. After walking for what felt like hours, she saw a dim, flickering light far away. It was small, but it was the only thing in that endless storm. She moved toward it, her legs trembling, her body aching. She fell twice, got back up, and kept walking. When she finally reached the light, she saw it came from a lantern held by a man standing in the snow. He was tall, wearing a thick coat and fur gloves. His beard was frosted white, and his eyes widened when he saw her. "You'll freeze out here," he shouted over the wind. Before she could answer, her knees gave way and she collapsed in the snow. The man dropped his lantern and lifted her gently into his arms. His cabin was a short walk away, hidden among the pine trees. Inside, the fire burned bright and the warmth made Amelia's head spin. The man laid her on a chair near the fire and wrapped a heavy blanket around her. "Drink this," he said, handing her a cup of hot soup. His voice was deep but kind. When she could finally speak, she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded. "You shouldn't have been out there alone." "What were you doing?" Amelia looked down, not knowing how to explain her story. "I had nowhere else to go," she said softly. The man studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You can stay here until the storm passes. My name's Ethan Cole." Amelia gave a faint smile. "I'm Amelia." That night she fell asleep by the fire for the first time in many years without fear or cold. The next morning she woke to the smell of bread baking. Ethan was already at the table, fixing a broken tool. He looked up and said, "You must be hungry." "There's food on the stove." Amelia hesitated. "I can help," she said. "I can cook or clean." He smiled. "We'll see. For now you rest." But resting wasn't something Amelia knew how to do. So while Ethan chopped wood outside, she tidied the small cabin, swept the floor, and washed the dishes. When he came back, he looked around, surprised. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to," she replied quietly. Days passed, and the storm outside kept raging. They had to stay indoors most of the time. Amelia began to talk more, though still softly. She learned that Ethan had lost his wife 5 years ago in another harsh winter. Since then, he had lived alone in the mountains, hunting, repairing tools, and growing what little he could. Something about his calmness made her feel safe. He never raised his voice, never looked down on her. When she made mistakes while helping him cook or clean, he only laughed and said, "You're learning." For the first time in her life, Amelia didn't feel like a burden. As the snow piled higher outside, she began to hum while she worked. The sound was small, but it made Ethan smile. He told her about the wildflowers that grew near the stream in summer, and she told him about her dreams of a quiet home where no one shouted. When the storm finally began to calm, Amelia stood at the door looking at the white mountains. She felt both grateful and afraid. Grateful for the man who had saved her, but afraid that once the snow melted, he would tell her to leave. She turned to him and said softly, "When the road opens again, I'll go." "You've done enough." Ethan looked at her for a long time before answering. "We'll talk about that when spring comes," he said simply. And that night, as she sat by the fire, listening to the crackle of wood, Amelia realized something she had never felt before: peace. For the first time, she didn't wish to be someone else. She just wished that winter would never end. When spring finally came, the snow around the cabin began to melt slowly. The mountain streams returned to life, and small patches of green appeared near the rocks. Birds started singing again, and sunlight filled the valley. Amelia stood near the window each morning, watching the world wake up. She had lived through a long winter that had almost taken her life, yet now she felt more alive than ever. Ethan had gone out early that morning to chop wood. She could hear the steady sound of his axe striking against the logs. Every sound of that rhythm gave her a strange feeling of peace. She had come to know him not just as the man who had saved her life, but as someone who listened, who cared, and who spoke to her with respect. Something she had never experienced before. Each day she tried to help him more. She cooked their meals, kept the fire burning, and learned to sew torn clothes. Ethan never demanded it. He often told her to rest, but Amelia felt happier when she was useful. It made her feel she belonged. One evening, after supper, Ethan sat quietly near the fire. Amelia noticed he had been working on something in secret for many days, carving pieces of wood and going out behind the cabin whenever he thought she wasn't watching. Her curiosity grew, but she didn't ask. She had learned he liked to surprise her. That night, as the wind whispered softly through the pine trees, she looked at him and said, "You've been busy with something lately. What are you making?" Ethan smiled, but didn't answer directly. "You'll see soon," he said. "It's almost finished." She smiled shyly and nodded. "I'll wait then." Over the next few weeks, they worked side by side. Amelia learned how to plant seeds and care for the small garden near the cabin. Ethan taught her how to find edible plants in the forest and how to make herbal tea from wild mint. She laughed when she burned the bread one morning, and he laughed with her instead of getting angry. The sound of laughter in the small cabin felt like sunlight after a long night. Every evening when the fire glowed warm and orange, Ethan would tell stories from his younger days, how he used to work as a carpenter in the town, how he lost his wife to illness, and how he came to live alone in the mountains. Amelia listened carefully, her eyes full of quiet understanding. She never asked too many questions. She just listened in silence, which somehow comforted him. As the days grew warmer, Ethan told her he had something to show her. He led her outside one morning down a small path behind the pine trees. The air smelled of fresh earth, and the sunlight made the snow on the mountain tops sparkle. When they reached the clearing, Amelia stopped in surprise. Before her stood a small wooden cabin newly built, with smoke gently rising from its chimney. The roof was neatly shaped, and there was a little porch with a chair made of logs. The door was painted a soft brown, and curtains hung by the window. Amelia stood still, her eyes wide. "You built this?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Yes, I built it these past weeks." "But why?" she whispered. He looked at her with gentle eyes. "Because I want you to have a home of your own," he said. "You've worked so hard, Amelia. You've brought warmth and peace back to my life. You deserve a place that's yours, a place where no one can call you useless again." Amelia covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "No one has ever done something like this for me," she said. Her voice trembled. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Ethan replied. "Just tell me if you'll stay." The words hung in the air, quiet and full of meaning. Amelia felt her heart race. She looked at the cabin again, the smooth wooden walls, the tiny garden he had started near the door, the little chair waiting for someone to sit. For the first time in her life, she felt what home truly meant. "But I don't want to take advantage of your kindness," she said softly. "You've already done so much. I don't deserve all this." Ethan took a small step closer. "You deserve much more than this," he said gently. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever: peace, laughter, company. You've reminded me what it means to care for someone again." Amelia's eyes filled again. She turned away, brushing her tears with her sleeve. "All my life, people called me useless," she said. "They said I was slow, silent, and not good enough. I started believing them. But when I came here, when you spoke kindly to me, I started to see that maybe I wasn't broken after all." Ethan smiled. "You were never broken, Amelia. The world just didn't see your worth." They stood there in silence for a while, listening to the soft sound of water running nearby and the wind moving through the trees. Then Ethan said quietly, "I don't have much to give. I live simple, but I can promise one thing. You will never be unwanted here." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "You mean, you want me to stay here? With you?" Ethan nodded. "If you'll have me, yes. I want you by my side. You've filled this mountain with light again, and if you stay, I'll be proud to call you my wife." Amelia froze. The words echoed softly, almost like a dream. For a moment she couldn't speak. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not with pity, but with respect and love. Her hands trembled slightly, and then she smiled through her tears. "If you truly mean it," she said in a whisper, "then I'll stay." Ethan reached out and held her hand gently. "Then it's settled," he said. "From now on, this place will be our home." Months passed, and the two of them built their new life together in the mountains. Amelia planted flowers by the door and painted the little fence that Ethan made for her. They kept chickens, grew vegetables, and shared every small task with quiet joy. When travelers or lost hunters passed through the mountain trails, they often stopped by the cabin for warmth. Amelia always welcomed them with food and a smile. People began calling their home the Cabin of Kind Hearts. The name spread from one traveler to another. Many would tell stories of the gentle woman who offered them soup on cold nights and the quiet man who fixed their wagons without taking payment. Ethan and Amelia never spoke much about how they met, but when people asked her how she found such peace, Amelia always smiled and said softly, "Kindness builds more than walls. It builds lives." Years went by. The seasons changed, but the warmth inside their small home never faded. On winter nights, they sat together by the fire, watching the snow fall outside. Ethan often looked at her across the table and smiled quietly. "Hard to believe," he would say, "that the storm brought you here." Amelia would smile back. "That storm gave me everything I ever wanted," she'd reply. Sometimes she thought about her old family in the village, the people who once called her useless. She didn't hate them anymore. In her heart, she forgave them. She realized that not everyone was lucky enough to see true kindness in their lifetime. Every morning she stepped out of her cabin, feeling the crisp mountain air, listening to the birds sing. The cabin stood strong against every storm, just like the love that held them together. And whenever Ethan called her name from the garden, she turned with the same quiet joy she had felt that first spring day. He still called her my wife with pride, and each time he said it, she felt that warm wave of belonging all over again. She had gone from being a girl everyone forgot to being the heart of a home that touched countless lives. And when she looked at the little cabin that Ethan had built for her, the home born from kindness, she knew one truth deep inside her soul. Sometimes the people we meet by accident are the ones who build us from the ground up. For Amelia, the lonely mountain was no longer a place of cold and silence. It was where she found love, dignity, and a life worth living. And every night when the stars shone bright over the mountain, she would whisper softly to herself, "I was never useless. I was just waiting to be found."